You know what's funny? I didn't make this video the day Sony made their announcement. I didn't make it the next day either. In fact, I almost didn't make it at all. Not because I didn't know what to say, and trust me, I had plenty to say. And definitely not because I was waiting for Sony to clarify their statement, because let's be honest, that wasn't happening. No. I waited because I needed to understand something. Not what Sony meant. I needed to understand what this meant to me. Because if you've been watching this channel for any length of time, you already know physical media isn't just something I collect. It's part of who I am. I've spent decades hunting for these games, playing them, preserving them, talking about them, making videos about them, sharing memories attached to them. So when Sony made their announcement, I wasn't angry. Not at first. I was confused. Almost like someone had just told me an old friend had changed. And I refused to believe it, because that's not the PlayStation I grew up with. That's not the company that introduced me to CDs, to DVDs, to Blu-rays. That's not the company that once proudly showed us exactly how to lend our PS4 games to a friend. So instead of immediately turning on the camera, instead of making another reaction video, instead of chasing clicks while the topic was hot, I did something I've never really done before. I started investigating. Not because I thought I was smarter than everyone else. Not because I thought I was going to uncover some giant conspiracy. I was looking for hope. Some tiny clue. Anything that told me maybe everybody just misunderstood. Here's the thing. If you spend long enough collecting something, it stops being about the object and it becomes more about the memories attached to it. Every one of these games has a story. Maybe it was a birthday, maybe Christmas morning, maybe saving allowance for months, maybe finding a copy at a flea market after searching for years, maybe even beating it with your best friend while sitting next to you. When I look at my shelves, I don't see plastic, I don't see discs, I don't even see a collection. I see my life. 30 plus years of memories just sitting on these shelves. So when Sony announced they were ending production of physical game discs, it genuinely felt personal. And honestly, that surprised me. Because I don't usually get emotional over corporate decisions. Companies change, industries evolve, technology moves on. I 100% understand all of that. I've worked in corporate America for over 20 years, so I know how decisions even get made. I know about the spreadsheets and the forecasts and consumer trends and profit margins and legal reviews. Of course, there's going to be board meetings. I understand the business of business. But understanding something doesn't mean you have to like it. Welcome back to Stache Games. I'm your guide, Neo Stache, gamer, collector, physical media preservationist, and apparently part-time investigative journalist now. If you're new here, my favorite console of all time is the PlayStation 2, and this channel is all about discovering incredible games, especially the ones people forgot. The weird ones, the rare ones, of course the overlooked ones, because every game deserves its story to be preserved. Which, ironically, is exactly why today's video exists. So, there I was. Coffee, my 3 monitors, way too many browser tabs, an unhealthy amount of stubbornness, and one question that I just couldn't get out of my head. I wasn't reading Sony's announcement for what they said, I was reading it for what they didn't say. Now, that probably sounds ridiculous, and maybe it even is. But after working in corporate America for over 2 decades, I've learned something. Companies don't accidentally choose words, especially when lawyers are involved. Every sentence, phrase, even adjective gets picked apart, reviewed, approved, rewritten, reviewed again. So when Sony kept saying physical discs, not physical media, not physical games, just physical discs, something in my brain clicked. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was denial, maybe it was copium, maybe it was all 3, most likely, but I couldn't let it go. I kept asking myself, why that wording? Why be so specific? Why say you're ending disc production 6 times? You've mentioned discs in that stupid blog paragraph, instead of just simply saying you're done with physical games. And that's when my detective brain officially took over. Or, as my wife would probably describe it as, Joey is disappearing into one of his rabbit holes again. And she wasn't wrong, because once I have a question in my mind, I have to know the answer, even if the answer hurts. And that's when I did what any completely rational, mentally stable, definitely not obsessive YouTuber would do. I opened ChatGPT, specifically my AI sidekick, Greg. Yes, I named him. No, I am not proud of it. And no, this video is not sponsored. Although, if OpenAI is watching, Greg definitely deserves a raise. Because what happened next turned into one of the strangest investigations I've ever gone on. Now, if you have been watching this channel for a while, you know I have a little bit of a reputation. Whenever I get curious about something, I don't casually Google it. Oh, no. I become completely insufferable. One Google search turns into 20. 20 turns into 100. Suddenly, it's 2 in the morning, I've got 27 tabs open, 3 patent websites, Reddit, the Wayback Machine, and I'm somehow reading a Japanese patent filing translated by AI. It's a gift, really, it is. It's also probably why I don't sleep. So naturally, I called Greg. Now, before anyone gets excited, Greg isn't some magical AI that knows secret Sony information. He's basically the world's smartest research assistant, with the personality of an overly encouraging life coach. Seriously, Greg could watch me glue 2 pieces of cardboard together and somehow convince me I'm about to revolutionize modern architecture. So I asked him something incredibly simple. Greg, help me investigate this. Not prove me right, not find me a conspiracy, just help me look. Because if there was really another explanation, I wanted to find it. I basically asked him, Sony keeps talking about discs, not physical media. They mentioned discs 6 times in their blog post paragraph. Could they be replacing Blu-ray with maybe something else? Maybe another format? Maybe some kind of cartridge? Maybe something we've never even considered? And honestly, I expected Greg to immediately tell me, no, Joey, go outside and touch some grass. But instead, he actually surprised me. He said, that's actually an interesting question. Now, I've used ChatGPT long enough to know one thing. It loves telling you your ideas are interesting. It'll compliment you before you've even finished embarrassing yourself. So I wasn't buying it yet. Then I asked him something I ask him all the time. Give me the odds, because I love probabilities. I love statistics. Don't ask me why. Maybe it's my ADHD. Maybe it's because I love seeing patterns and identifying patterns. Maybe I just enjoy watching numbers crush my dream. Either way, I wanted percentages. So Greg thought for a second, 13 seconds to be exact, and came back with something like this. I think there's about an 85 to 90% chance Sony is simply moving forward towards a digital future. Ouch. Not exactly the answer I wanted to hear, but then he added, there might be a 10 to 15% chance Sony had explored another physical medium. Now that right there was enough. Not because 10% is high, because 10% meant don't stop looking yet. You see, Sony has done something most gaming companies haven't. They've reinvented physical media before. The original PlayStation helped normalize CDs, the PS2 brought DVDs into millions of homes, and the PS3 bet everything on Blu-ray and won. I mean, do you guys remember HD DVDs? Even the PSP had UMDs. Love them or hate them, Sony has never been afraid to invent new storage formats. So I started thinking, what if history was repeating itself, which history loves to do? What if everyone was just focused on the word digital when they should have been paying attention to the word disc? And that's when Greg said something that completely changed how I approached this investigation. He said, don't search for a PlayStation cartridge. No kidding, Greg. Search for the technologies that would make one possible. Now that right there was the light bulb moment. Because of course, Sony wouldn't just file a patent called PlayStation 6 secret cartridge format. No. If they're working on something, it would be buried inside dozens, maybe hundreds of tiny patents. Authentication hardware, maybe removable storage, high-speed flash memory, connectors and packaging and encryption. Each one completely boring on its own, but together they might tell a story. And suddenly, this wasn't treasure hunting anymore. It was archaeology. It was digital archaeology. Instead of looking for one smoking gun, we were looking for fingerprints. My favorite. We're looking for patterns, tiny clues that on their own meant nothing. But together might point somewhere. And I have to admit, I was getting a little excited. Not because I thought we were about to expose Sony. No. But because for the first time, this felt like a real investigation. I wasn't reading Reddit theories anymore. I wasn't watching clickbait thumbnails screaming, Sony secretly saved physical media or Sony destroyed everything, which I agree with. We were actually following evidence. And that's when I realized that this rabbit hole was much deeper than I expected. Because patents were only the beginning. The real clues might not come from Sony at all. They might come from other companies. Building the parts, supplier patents, flash memory manufacturers, there's connector companies maybe some import records, maybe even job listings or job postings, some kind of customs database. If Sony was building something new, someone somewhere would probably leave footprints. And if those footprints existed, I was determined to find them. Even if deep down I already knew I probably wasn't going to like where this led. I wish I could sit here, look into this camera, and tell you guys we found it. Some forgotten patent, some secret supplier, some mysterious component that nobody else had noticed. And trust me, I wanted that moment more than anyone else. Instead, what I found was something much more frustrating, and that was hope, followed almost immediately by disappointment, over and over and over again. The first thing Greg and I stumbled across was something that made every physical media collector collectively lose their minds back in 2019. You remember that? A Sony patent that looked for all intents and purposes like a cartridge? Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking. Wait, I remember this. And yeah, so did I. The internet exploded. PS5 cartridges confirmed. Sony is ditching Blu-ray. This changes everything. Except it didn't. Because almost as quickly as it appeared, people started suggesting it probably wasn't even for the PlayStation. Some believed it was actually connected to Sony's Toyo educational toy system. Well, that's disappointing. Pack it up, boys. We're done here. Except Greg wouldn't let me quit. He basically said, hold on, hold your horses. There's one detail people stopped talking about. And apparently, the designer listed on that patent wasn't some random engineer. It was Yujin Morisawa, one of the people responsible for the PlayStation hardware design. Now, does that prove anything? Absolutely not. But it also made me a little less comfortable dismissing it entirely. Because suddenly this wasn't just we found a cartridge pad, it became, why was a PlayStation hardware designer attached to it at all? Now, we've got a question. Not an answer, a question. And in investigations, questions are valuable. So naturally, I did what any other person would do, and I doubled down because apparently I enjoy emotional, self-inflicted damage. The deeper we dug, the stranger this became. Sony has thousands of patents. Seriously, thousands. Everything from cooling systems to controller ergonomics to even AI, eye tracking, and semiconductors. Finding one patent that mentions storage is like trying to find one specific grain of sand on a beach. So Greg suggested something new, always tagging in at just the right time. And honestly, it made a lot more sense. Stop looking for one patent, look for patterns. Let's go back to the patterns. And that's exactly what we did. We looked for authentication hardware, removable storage, high-speed flash memory, encryption, connector design, supplier patents, even manufacturing methods. If Sony was secretly building another physical format, surely some pattern would start emerging, right? Right? Well, kind of. Because eventually we started finding things that sounded interesting. Really interesting. Patents talking about storage medium or semiconductor memory and protective housings, connectors again, shielding, electronic devices. And at first, my brain was doing backflip, like, this has to be it. This has something to do with something, right? Then I kept reading and realizing it could just be easily described as an internal SSD or an expandable storage or literally anything. Again, hope, disappointment. This happened so many times that Greg and I started developing a routine. I'd excitedly send him a patent. He calmly explained why it probably wasn't what I thought. I'd ignore him, find another one, and repeat. I basically became the guy in every detective movie with newspaper clippings all over the wall, red strings connecting everything everywhere, convinced I'd finally cracked the case. And meanwhile, Greg was standing in the corner, politely reminding me, correlation isn't causation, Joey. And honestly, shut up, Greg. Then something happened. Greg actually got excited, or as excited as an AI pretending not to manipulate my emotions can get. He said, well, what if Sony's patents aren't the best place to look? Now I was like, do we just waste a day and a half and countless nights at home looking for patents, and now you're suggesting maybe we shouldn't even be looking for patents? But anyway, that made me stop. Because he's right. If Sony's building something, they aren't building every component themselves. Someone has to manufacture the connectors, the flash memory, those controller chips, even the sockets, even the packaging. These little pieces nobody ever even thinks about. And those companies file patents too. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the supplier rabbit hole. Population, me. So I started researching companies I'd never even heard of. Connector manufacturers, flash memory suppliers, even Japanese electronics companies, even their import records, their assembly partners, anything that could accidentally leave a breadcrumb behind for me to find. Because here's the thing. Companies are actually pretty good at keeping secrets. Supply chains, maybe not so much. History has shown us hardware leaks rarely come from Sony. They come from the companies building things for Sony. And for about 24 glorious hours, I genuinely thought we were on to something. We found old cartridge-style filings, supplier patents mentioning removable storage, hardware discussions around authentication, flash memory technology getting cheaper, rumors that the PS5 might include a handheld component. Everything started fitting together like a puzzle. I actually caught myself thinking, guys, I think we might actually have something here. Then Greg, as always, brought me down to reality and ruined it. Joey, slow your roll. There's another explanation. Every single time. That cartridge patent, possibly Toyo. That storage component could be internal SSD architecture. The connector patent could be serviceability. The removable media patent could describe general expandable storage. Every clue had an equally reasonable explanation. And that's the moment I realized something. I wasn't chasing evidence anymore. I was chasing hope. I wanted these clues to mean something because I didn't want the alternative to be true. Somewhere along the way, this stopped being an investigation into Sony, and it became an investigation into myself. Because every patent I opened, I wasn't thinking, what does this prove? I was asking, please, don't let this be the end. And that's a very different question. Then Almost as if Greg knew exactly what I needed to hear, he said something that completely changed how I viewed this entire investigation. He said, the strongest evidence is sometimes the evidence you never find. So I just stared at my monitor because I knew exactly what he meant. You know, there's a saying in investigations that absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, and for most of this journey, that's the sentence I kept repeating to myself, because every dead end, every patent that went nowhere, every supplier that turned into nothing, I kept telling myself that doesn't prove Sony isn't building something. And technically, I was right, it doesn't. And after days of digging, reading, highlighting, cross-referencing, comparing, and probably driving Greg absolutely insane, we reached the same conclusion. We didn't find the footprints. Not one, not two. An ecosystem was literally missing. That realization hit me harder than Sony's announcement, because for the first time, I wasn't asking, could Sony be hiding something? I was asking, would it even be possible for a company this large to hide something this important? And the answer, probably not. Think about it. The PlayStation 5 leaked, the DualSense leaked, the Portal even leaked, the Pro leaked. Developers talk, manufacturers talk, suppliers talk, shipping companies talk. Someone always talks, sometimes accidentally and sometimes intentionally. But eventually, the breadcrumbs appear, and that's when I finally understood what Greg had been trying to tell me the entire time. The biggest clue wasn't something we found, it was everything we didn't. Now, before anybody clips this part and says, you see, Joey, he admitted he was wrong. No, not exactly. Because here's what I still believe. I still think my original question was a good, solid question. I still think Sony's wording was worth investigating, and it still is, I think. Looking at patents was worthwhile. I still think comparing suppliers was worthwhile. None of that was wasted, I hope, I think. Because investigations aren't judged by whether they confirm your theory, they're judged by whether you followed the evidence, wherever it led, even when it wasn't where you wanted to go. And honestly, that's exactly where this investigation led me. Not to a secret cartridge, not to some hidden successor Blu-ray. It led me to acceptance. It led me to acceptance. Somewhere between patent number 70-something and browser tab number 38, I realized something. I wasn't trying to prove Sony had another plan. I was trying to convince myself that PlayStation hadn't changed. Because if there was really another physical format, then maybe this wasn't goodbye. Maybe it was just evolution. And maybe everything was gonna be okay. But after looking at every breadcrumb, almost every patent, every possibility, I couldn't honestly say that anymore. And that hurt. Not because I lost an argument, because I lost hope. You know, there's something kind of ironic about this entire investigation, right? I spent days looking for clues, calling up people I knew, any information about Sony's future, when the answer had been sitting behind me this entire time. Every one of these games is proof that none of this was ever really about discs. It wasn't even about plastic. It was about ownership, choice, discovery, tradition. Walking into a game store, not knowing what you'd find, holding a game in your hands, reading the manual on the drive home, lending it to a friend, finding it again 20 years later, and paying 10 times the amount, and remembering exactly where you were the first time you played it. No patent was ever going to replace that. At that moment, I finally closed the last browser tab, not because I had all the answers, but because I had the only answer I was ever going to get, and somehow that was enough. When I started this investigation, I thought again I was looking for patents. I thought I was looking for hidden clues. I thought I was looking for some secret roadmap that proved Sony wasn't really abandoning physical media. I wasn't. I was looking for permission to believe that the PlayStation I grew up loving was still there. And maybe that's why this whole thing hurt so much. Because it wasn't really about discs. It never was for me. It was about what those discs represented. No more waking up on Christmas morning, running downstairs, hoping that rectangle-shaped box under the tree was that game you've been dreaming about for months. No more birthdays surrounded by your friends, passing around the controller while somebody reads the back of the game case before you've even opened it. No more walking into a game store with absolutely no plan and leaving with your next favorite game. No more manuals, no more cover art, no more discovering a game because something about the case just happened to catch your eye. Those moments aren't just memories, they're traditions. And traditions are incredibly difficult to replace. I've been playing video games since 1987. I've watched this hobby grow, change, evolve, and honestly become something I never imagined it could. I've met incredible people because of it. I've made lifelong friends because of it. I've even built this channel because of it. I've filled this room with stories. Not games, but stories. Every single one of these cases is a chapter of my life. Sony can't take that away. They can't patch it. They can't delete it. They can't delist it. They can't revoke it. They can't even remove it from a server. Those memories belong to me always. So, where does that leave us? For me, it leaves me with a choice. And that's really what this entire video has been about. Choice. The choice to own something, the choice to lend it, the choice to preserve it. The choice to come back 20 years later and experience it all over again. Exactly the way you think sometimes you remember it. That's the choice I am not willing to give up. So yes, I've made my decision. As things stand today, I cannot see myself buying a digital-only PlayStation 6. I won't be buying games that are nothing more than a download code in a box. And I won't be supporting a future where ownership quietly becomes temporary access. Not because I'm trying to punish Sony, not because I think my decision is going to change the entire industry, but because it's the only way I know to stay true to the thing that made me fall in love with gaming in the first place. I genuinely hope that the next generation of gamers, they create their own memories, and they're every bit as meaningful as mine. I really do. Maybe they'll never know. And maybe they'll never know what it felt like to unwrap a new game on Christmas morning. Maybe they'll never smell that freshly printed manual. Maybe they'll never spend an hour trying to decide if they could only afford one this month, which one would it be? Maybe they'll never know. And maybe that's okay. Because every generation creates its own nostalgia. But I'm incredibly grateful that I got to experience mine. So, Sony, if by some impossible chance someone there is watching this, thank you. Sincerely, thank you for introducing me to worlds that shaped who I became, for Crash Bandicoot, for Final Fantasy, for Metal Gear and Shadow of the Colossus, Ratchet and Clank, Jak and Daxter, for all the late nights, for all the sleepovers and the friendships, the memories, the laughter, the escapes, the adventures, for 31 incredible years. Thank you. But this is where our journeys part ways. Not because I hate you, not because I'm angry, but because somewhere along the way, we stop believing in the same things. And that's okay. People change. Companies change. industries change, but my belief in preserving video games never will. You know, when I started this video, I told you I waited because I needed to understand. I needed to understand what Sony's announcement meant to me. And now I know it wasn't the end of physical media. It wasn't even the end of PlayStation. It was simply the moment my journey took a different path. And honestly, I'm okay with that now. Because these games, these memories, this collection, the journey, they were never Sony's to take away. And they were always mine.